We are live. Tom Ginn here, G-Force. G is for gratitude. We'll be right back. Good afternoon, Tom Ginn, G-Force. G is for gratitude. I believe gratitude is one of the most powerful principles we can incorporate in our life. I was introduced to this book, Gratitude Works by Robert A. Emmons. I encourage anybody out there to pick it up. Gratitude is a very powerful spiritual principle. It works spiritually, it works in our physiology, our mindset, and everything else. It's a very powerful book, a little 21-day workbook. I encourage people to embrace gratitude at a much deeper level. I do 3 different live streams. This was my first one. I want to just give recognition to Ken Walls, who introduced me to how to stream, and it's made a big difference in my life personally, the challenges it gives, and being able to do a program like this to get guests like my guest coming up today, get a powerful message out to improve people's lives. So G-Force, I believe it powers our purest potential from the spiritual side all the way to our physical side. And I just encourage everybody out there to tag and share today's broadcast, either on the live or the replay. We never know what message, where it'll touch somebody, make a difference in somebody's life. So today, I'm going to introduce a colleague in the Grow Live Academy, Kimberly Stevens. Are you ready to come in, Kimberly? There she is.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on today.
I'm really excited to hear your story, and we'll be talking about your book here in a moment. So it's going to be all your stage. But I always like to start out, because this is about gratitude. What are you grateful for today?
Something very basic, and that is simply to be here, breathing and alive. And that sounds so cliche, but once you've been diagnosed with cancer or lost a child to a rare disease, and you understand how fragile life really is,
yes,
it is a privilege that we're still here.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing your gratitude for today. I sort of start the same way out every day, being grateful that I have another day to serve. I believe every person on this earth has special gifts and talents, and we're here to serve and try to make a difference in other people's lives. So I'm grateful for this very moment. When people ask me how I'm doing, I say, this is the best day of my life. I'm so grateful for this moment, because we don't know we have no guarantees that we'll be here another 5 seconds or 10 years from now. So we've got to embrace it. I believe gratitude is one of those areas that we've been culturally conditioned to respond. When people say, how are you doing today? Most people automatically respond to, oh, I'm okay, I'm fine, great, whatever. We have just a surface response. When we really study the power of gratitude, the spiritual aspects of it, and go deep, it can definitely change your life and change other people's life, coming from a space of gratitude. I believe gratitude opens up what I call the gateway to some very powerful spiritual principles: peace, joy, and love. And it sets the right framework, your right spiritual laws start working for you, and you can definitely move and elevate yourself daily by the moment, no matter what's going on. I always like to make a recommendation. We've heard this many times in personal development. Write a gratitude statement every day. In this book, the world record, and you knowing a little bit about you, being a competitive athlete, and you'll tell that here in a moment, is that the world record for writing a gratitude statement, never missing a day, is 50 years.
Oh my gosh.
Every day wrote a gratitude statement, never replicated or duplicated a gratitude statement, but it took it to the next level. Why are you grateful? I think when we really understand gratitude and why we're grateful for having you on today, and dive deep into that, we have a much greater appreciation in that. So I encourage people to get the book, understand that principle in itself, learn the discipline. Like anything you want to grow in life, it does take discipline, it does take work. Same with improving our gratitude quotient, I call it. So I just encourage everybody to get this book, reference it. I believe it'll make a big difference. It has in my life, and it's made a big difference in my client's life as well. So today it's all about you. I always like to start out, tell the audience a little bit about where everything began. Where were you born? A little bit about your journey and your why. We're going to get into your book, and we'll talk about your book here in a moment.
Well, it all began in a little town called Hinsdale, Illinois, and it's a little tiny suburb outside of Chicago. And Tom, I know you are familiar with that area.
Yes.
Hinsdale is actually known for swimming. And in the 1960s and the 1970s, we had our high school years and years, back-to-back years of state championships and national championships in some cases as well. And so Hinsdale was known for swimming. And that was how I got into swimming at the age of 10.
At age of 10. I remember, I'm an athlete. I played traditional boys sports. We had a swim team in our high school, and we had a swim center in our community as well. And my neighbor across the street, Darren Wester, encouraged me to come to the pool one day and says, you should join the swim club and learn how to swim and be a racer, a swim racer. I did that one day, and I said, this is not going to happen. I almost drowned that day. I didn't realize how strenuous swimming is. It is a grueling sport.
It is. Yeah.
Darren was a world-class Olympic swimmer. He qualified for the Olympics, set international records in the breaststroke. Yes. So I had an opportunity to meet a world-class swimmer, but I have to appreciate how hard it took to, the type of work and discipline that takes to compete at that level. So I highly respect those that are swimmers, because I believe it's one of the more physically demanding sports that are out there. So
it definitely teaches discipline and hard work and the importance of both. So I wasn't always a good swimmer. I too almost drowned my first day of swimming. As a matter of fact, when I tried out for the team, I learned later that the coaches had put an asterisk by my name, and later told my parents when they announced that I actually made the swim team. They said, anyone who has an asterisk by their name, we don't expect they'll last more than a few days. So I was an asterisk. My parents decided that I wasn't going to quit in a couple of days. So the deal was, we're going to buy you a cap, we're going to buy you goggles and a team suit, which I had none of, and you will swim for a year. And so I had to swim for a year. And then it became many years after that.
And I think that's an important discipline that we, as parents, to encourage kids when they start something, commit to finishing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Swimming changed my life. Swimming saved my life. And swimming really was the foundation in everything about my story. Yes. My book is called Altered, and it is finding hope through grit and gratitude. We've already talked a lot about gratitude, but the grit piece I learned in swimming.
Yeah. And I think that's where athletics really has an impact on forming people's disciplines in life, whether it be traditional sports that people are familiar with. It would be football, baseball, basketball, track, field, stream, swimming, golf, or whatever. It does create disciplines I call life disciplines that can be applied throughout your entire life. I encourage people, don't discount athletics as just another thing to do and have some fun. It does create and build character and those things necessary for life. So you started out they had an asterisk next to your name. How did you react to have when they said you'd probably quit? How did you personally react to that?
I did not know. My parents only shared that information with me years later.
Okay.
So I'm glad I didn't know.
Knowing what you know now about that, how would you think you as a young person back then would have reacted to that? Did you have that Spitfire, I'll show you type attitude?
I did not. I'll tell you when that attitude, when I made the decision to have that attitude, it was right after my first big meet. And my first big meet was a B meet. Think about that. There are A movies and B movies. This was a B meet. And I really didn't even have the qualifying times to be at the B meet, but I was swimming anyway. And it was a full weekend of swimming. And on the way home from that meet on Sunday afternoon, there were 6 kids piled in the back of my mom's station wagon. 5 of them were showing off their ribbons that were as big as my head, and one of them was crying. I was the one who was crying. And I, again, told my parents I was quitting. And they said, no, you're not quitting. You have made a commitment for a year. And so the only thing my 10-year-old mind knew to do at that point was figure it out. So I decided I didn't like losing. I didn't like being the only kid in the car that didn't get a ribbon. And so I decided to win. And winning didn't come immediately, I have to tell you. What deciding to win did for me was it made me show up in the pool. It made me learn how to, the swimming techniques that would make me faster and better in the pool. And it wasn't really until I was about 16 that I started experiencing some real success. So it took a little while.
Sure, like all good things take a while. So all success has a gestation period.
This one was long, 6 years.
So you started out at age 10. You experienced some sadness that you didn't get a medal or a ribbon or whatever the case may be. You wanted to quit, but your parents held true to their commitment to you. You're not quitting. That's
absolutely,
because every decision we make ultimately affects the outcome where we're at today. Where we are today is directly related to what happened when you were age 10. So
I 100% believe that.
Yeah.
Without that, I can tell you, sure as I am sitting here, that I would not be here because I would not have survived the rest of my life without learning the discipline and commitment that I learned when I was a swimmer.
Yeah. So it wasn't until you were around 15 or 16 you started seeing the fruits of your labors. You started getting what, quote, success is. I believe sticking to it is success. I believe in personal development. It's not the end result that determines your success. It's who you become along the way. And that's where you evaluate success. So at age 15 or 16, you started getting the fruits of your labors.
I did. As a matter of fact,
a little bit about what that was and where it led you competitively.
Yeah. So I did go on to set some Big Ten records in college. I won Canadian Nationals in 1986. And then actually long after college in the early 2000s and late 2000s, I swam in Masters Nationals and was an open water swimming champion as well. So my success in swimming took a little break after college and then resurfaced, to use a swimming term, several years after college. My biggest up and down in swimming actually happened my senior year in high school. And I was seated first in the 50 freestyle, and I was seated first in the 100 freestyle. And this was the state meet championship. Our team was supposed to win the state championship. And my 2 races were a contributing factor to the points that would eventually get our team to the state championship. And I was barely 17 as a senior. And I stood up on the blocks for the 50 free and feeling the pressure. And the starter said, take your mark. And I not only took my mark, but I dove into the pool. And in those days, the first false start was charged to the heat. So we all got called back, stepped back up on the blocks. Starter said, take your mark. And I dove again. And I was disqualified. And that meant it was a complete and utter failure, not only for myself and my future college scholarship that I was looking to earn, but I let my team down. We were not going to win state meet without those points. I let my coach down. I let my parents down. I let myself down. I let everybody down. And I wanted to run out of the building and be one of those swimmers who was never heard from again. And as I was getting out of the pool, I'm about to cry. As I was getting out of the pool, my coach literally grabbed me and she took me into the locker room. And I don't remember her exact words. If I did, I think I would print them and bottle them and put them on every wall in my home. But it was something to the effect of, the past is gone and you've got a job to do in about a half an hour. You have to get back up there and swim the 100 free. And luckily, the event in between the 50 free and the 100 free was diving, which was a little bit longer than just one swim race. So I had a few minutes to collect myself in the locker room. But I think my coach must have sat guard at the door so that I didn't run away, because that was all I could think of doing. And it came time for the 100 free. And I did go out there. The whistle blew. I got up on the blocks and I just knew I was not going to false start. So I had a slow start. And so instead of winning that race, I got second. And consequently, as a result of all of my two swims combined, my team also got second in the state championship. And it was a bittersweet second. It did earn me the spot, or I was able to go on to college and still get a scholarship. Later, when I asked my coach at Iowa, where I had committed, why he signed me after I had such a disastrous high school state meet, he said to me, because you proved that you could come back after adversity. And I remember shrugging that off and not thinking it was that big of a deal at the time. When I asked, I was 18 and a freshman in college. And what I didn't know then is that that would really be a profound statement spoken over me, and that I would need that. And I would need to draw back on that moment after my 50 free and before my 100 free, where I had to recollect myself. Whatever was done in that moment, I would need in many more moments going forward in the rest of my life.
Wow. That would be just an emotional and psychological challenge to every time you got on the blocks. I'm sure that crossed your mind, and be able to work past it, emotionally get control of yourself so that you can perform at your highest level. That I have to commend you on that. What a challenge that must have been every time you started a race.
It still does. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went to college, and a little backstory on your college career. What did you do there? And
so
what the rest of your life here? And
I went to the University of Iowa, and I specialized there in the 100 and 200 free. I was a pre-law major with French and Russian when I wanted to go into international law. And I ended up, after my swimming career, I ended up going on to the staff of Campus Crusade for Christ, which they now call Crew. And I met my husband on the first day of our training, and we got married 11 months after we met, and our first son, our first child, was born about 11 months after that. So what was a very happy moment for 6 days turned into one of my saddest moments, in that on the 6th day of my son's life, he was not breathing right. And after hours of listening to his breathing and finally calling the doctor and explaining to her what was going on, she let us know we needed to get him into the hospital immediately to be assessed. And in the time it took to make the phone call and then get him to the car, he was breathing even worse. He would exhale and then he wouldn't initiate his inhale. And so I would jostle him just a little bit and wake him up a little bit, and he would take his breath. So we got in the car. I sat in the back with him next to his car seat and kept jostling him. And about 10 minutes into the car ride, he just wouldn't breathe anymore. And so I took him out of the seat, I put him in my lap, and I just started doing mouth to mouth the way they had taught us in our infant CPR class. And I managed to hold on until we got to the hospital, and ran him into the hospital and pounded on the window and said, "He's not breathing." And they grabbed him from me and they took him in the back, and they put me in another room, and I waited for my husband to come in. And we sat in this room for what seemed like hours, probably was hours. And they just kept coming with updates saying, "You have a very sick little boy. We're doing everything we can." And finally, we got the news that he had been stabilized, and they were suspecting that he had an infection. And they said if he lived 24 hours, he would probably be fine. So we set our sights on 24 hours of life, and we made it, and there was no change in him. And by about the 4th day in the hospital, they had been ruling out all causes of this coma that he was in. And we learned that he had been born with an inborn error of metabolism called citrullinemia. It's now one of the tests that they test for when they do the heel sticks in newborn babies, but they didn't do that back then. And what had happened is he was born without an enzyme in his liver that allowed him to process protein. So protein would build up in his system, and it would build up in the form of nitrogen or ammonia, like floor cleaner. And nitrogen, as it builds up, causes irritability, lethargy, coma, brain damage, and death. And by the time we had been able to diagnose him, my milk had come in, and it was actually the protein from my milk. Formula would have done the same. It wasn't just because it was my milk. He couldn't process protein. And we stayed on a roller coaster trying to treat him for a couple of days. And we lost the battle when he was 15 days old. And it was a very dark day for me.
I can't comprehend losing a loved one, let alone a child. Just, that's being a parent myself. That's just, it's incomprehensible. So in your book, I know you referenced how did you regroup yourself to move forward with your life after that loss?
So Tom, I'd like to say that I handled it with composure and dignity and grace, but that's not the truth. It was just like that moment between my 50 free and my 100 free, except it lasted a lot longer. And I cried, I raged, I was angry with God. I was angry at other people because they could still laugh and they could still play and they could still see the sunshine. And there were days where I wanted to just scream out to the world, how can you just go on? Don't you know my son is dead? How do you do this? And I think that's the cruelest part about loss. And it doesn't matter if we lose a child, a sibling, a parent, a spouse. When we lose somebody, it's a very personal loss. And the world doesn't feel it the way that we do. It's just not as profound to others. And that was a very, very hard thing for me to wrap my brain around as I was growing and maturing. And I was 25 at the time, and the world still revolved around me, and that was probably the most difficult part of it.
And from there, what happened moving forward in your life to where you are today? That journey, and we'll talk about your book here in a moment. I want to ask you what inspired you to write your book.
Absolutely. So that moment lasted about 8 months, and I became very angry, and I kept asking the question, why? And there was one day when I decided that I was just going to go into a chapel and I was going to sit there until I got my answer. And so I did. I walked in the chapel and I was not coming out until I got my answer. And what I realized when I was in there and talking to God, and not talking nicely either, was that no reason God could give me, audibly or otherwise, would take away my pain. There was no reason that was going to make it better. And I realized at that moment that if there's no reason, why am I asking why? That's the wrong question. And as soon as I realized that, it was like a light bulb went on, that the question's not why. The question is how? How do I get back up on the blocks and swim the 100 free? How do I decide to go forward and have more children when it's a 1 in 4 chance for every child that I have? How do I live to see tomorrow with hope in my Creator, who I believed was a good God yesterday, today, and always? And because my circumstances changed, He didn't change. It was me who was changing. And I began to let go of the question of why, and hope found its way back into my heart. And thankfully and gratefully, I did go on to have other children. I had 3 miscarriages after Braden, my son, and then my daughter Victoria was born. And her name is Victoria Faith, which means conqueror through faith. And we were given a prenatal diagnosis for her of healthy. We did get the news when she was 3 days old that she actually had the disease as well. We had not gotten as far into the disease with her as my son had gotten. And so we were able to intervene. And with treatment, low protein and medications, we were able to keep her, I wouldn't say stable, because we spent almost 4 years in the hospital with her, and it was in and out with different ammonia levels, and she was in a coma a few times, and there were some very, very difficult days keeping her alive in those 4 years. We did get to the point where we could not keep her stable anymore through our medical management, or our fake intervention is what we were doing. And so we put her on the transplant list for a new liver. A new liver gave her a liver that had the enzyme that she genetically couldn't make. And so it actually cured her disease, but it also gave us some new medical issues to think about and to deal with. But I'm happy to say she is 29 now. Wow. And she is the first of kids behind her now who have been born with citrullinemia who are surviving. And so she's the first of many miracles. And Victoria Faith, conqueror through faith. And what am I grateful for? I only have to say those words and tears for them. And I cannot thank God enough for the gift of her life.
Wow. That is amazing. Amazing. So that in itself, working in that area of fear of possibly losing another child, that I can't comprehend that, how that affected you. I just can't comprehend that. So moving on from there, what?
So I have to mention my other miracle is Daniel Robert. He was born 22 months after Victoria, and he was born without citrullinemia, the disease that affected Braden and Tori. And he is 27, lives and works in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he's amazing and my delight and joy.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I want to move a little bit down the road here. I'm going to bring something up here. About your book. This is your book, Altered.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to talk a little bit about your book, what inspired you to write the book Altered, and the premise behind the title.
Yes. So Altered, ALTAR, that's the altar of God. That's all capitals because that's about God. And then the apostrophe D is lowercase because that's about me. And that was just a very important way for me to spell that or write that out, because without God and without that moment that I spent at the altar, many moments actually, after my son died, where I laid down my whys and my anger, I would still be stuck in that mess. And so Altered is nothing more than a play on words about being changed, but being changed in a very special place at the altar of God. And then the grit and gratitude piece, gosh, I've wanted to give up so many times in my life, and I almost did, many, many times. And God always brought a person, a circumstance, something special to remind me that I'm here for a purpose. I'm created on purpose for a purpose, as my friend Chad Free likes to say. He gave me grit in the pool to get through the really tough times. But more importantly, he gave me gratitude that gets us through everything.
Exactly.
And so this book is just a story. And my story does go on after my son was born. I went on to go through a very dark period of 10 years where I grew very angry with God again. And it took being diagnosed with breast cancer in 2010 for me to have another altar moment and come back to God. And then the debt that I incurred due to poor decisions about health insurance took me to absolute financial ruin after cancer and my surgeries and treatments. And I ended up losing first my car, then I sold most of my possessions, and then I lost my home as well. And didn't have a job because of a shakeup in the pharmaceutical sales industry. And so I ended up getting my health insurance license and fixing the problem that actually got me into the situation in the first place. And I've been able to rebuild my life through selling health insurance, essentially. And so this book is a book about redemption. It's a book about loss, but it's mostly a book about hope. Because in that moment when we want to give up, that's when we need to not ask why. We need to let go of the past, forget about the 50 free, and remember that life goes forward and we have this moment right now. And the past doesn't matter and the future is not yet to be. So right now is what we have. And that is the time to be grateful. And in that moment of gratitude, we can get to the next moment. That's hope.
Well said. Appreciate that much. So this whole thing has led you to write. When did you write the book? When did you start writing the book?
I knew that I was going to write a book about 12 or 15 years ago. And I just kept telling God that I wasn't ready to write it. And that when it was time, that he'd pretty much have to take the pen in my hand and write the words. And almost exactly a year ago, I was sitting in a meeting for the Orlando Christian Chamber of Commerce, and they were studying a passage on Jonah. And it was my first time ever with this organization. And they asked the question, are there any ways in your life that you're like Jonah? And I'm like, no, not me. And it came my turn to share, and the words that came out of my mouth surprised me. I said, yes, I'm supposed to be writing a book and I'm not doing it. And that was an impetus to take a harder look at what I was running away from. And really, I was running away from having to see my entire story in one place, because that was really overwhelming to me. Remembering it in pieces was less painful. And to put it all together felt extremely overwhelming. When I outlined it in June of last year, I did not know how I would write the words. And by grace, the words seemed to have come out all right on the paper. But it was overwhelming. There were a lot of tears as I was writing it, not because my story surprised me, but when I saw it all together and I saw what God has done to bring me through so many things and how big his faithfulness is and how amazing he is, I was overwhelmed in a very good way.
Yeah.
And gratitude, I knew that it had a place in my story, but once I saw it all together, I was even more grateful for God's deliverance and his faithfulness when I was not.
Wonderful. That's a great testimonial about gratitude. It is a very powerful word. It changes our perspective. It allows us to move positively forward no matter what the circumstances are. There's something that can be learned in a positive way from a loss of a child. You don't recognize it at the moment, but when you reflect back and being grateful that you had that experience, it changes everything. It allows you to move forward in a different way. So, thank you for being a guest here on G-force. Gratitude does work more ways than we know. We take it for granted. I believe it's the foundation, the gateway to higher spiritual understanding. If we can understand the simplest things first, we can comprehend the greatest concepts ever created: true love, peace, and joy. So
amen and amen.
yeah, going to the altar, going to the church, be still and know. And that we need to quiet down many times, just no matter what in the positive things of our life, sit quiet. God gives you answers for your whys, your purpose, and gives you answers that you can't comprehend and create yourself. They will come to you. I believe that's a very powerful principle. And understand that loss is a loss. We are all losing something every day. As we age, we're losing something. I turned 73 yesterday. I know
Happy
that.
birthday.
Well, thank you. So grieving is something we all deal with. It could be the loss of a job. It could be the loss of anything, a loss of a loved one like you've gone through, the challenges with your next child, and then having the blessing and not having to do that again with a third child. I'm sure that prepared you in a different way to raise your children in a different way. That they're here today, and be grateful that we do have the gifts of God coming through our medical system and doctors and whatever it takes. That is not man created. I believe law is non-man made, and gratitude's non-man made. When we try to make things man-made, they don't work. So I really appreciate your story. I encourage anybody out there to get your book. I'm going to put that banner up again here so they can see it.
Thanks. And I wanted to mention really quickly, each chapter of the book or each section has a playlist of songs that have inspired me to maintain my hope and to be grateful and to continue to be strong in the Lord. And I put that playlist on Spotify, and I would love to share that playlist. It's about 4.5 hours of inspiring music that can be played in the background. So if you would like a copy of that playlist, just email me at kimberly@kimsharens.com. It's going down through the banner. But I would love to get you a copy of that playlist on Spotify.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely reach out to you and get that Spotify. Give me some something to listen to as I do the things I do daily. So I look forward to that as well. So anything else in closing that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful that my story can inspire others who are going through tough times. We all go through them. And the message is never give up. Never give up hope.
Right. Thank you. Well, I'm going to put you in the back room here. Don't go anywhere. I'll wrap it up, and then so just stay tight, okay?
Okay.
All right. Wow, what a story. Can't comprehend that type of challenge and the hurt and the pain and the loss of a young person that you brought into this world. And her life story is something we all can plug into, and knowing that there is hope in everything. And she understands grit, what it takes to get through that. You don't ever give up. The outcomes, we can't predict many cases what that outcome is going to be, but with hope and faith, God will deliver what we need in the appropriate time and place. I totally believe that. So I appreciate Kimberly's presence here today. I encourage you to seek out her book. It's on Amazon. Just look up Altered as she spelt it there, of the altar, comma D. I really love love how she came up with that name of her book. That's pretty powerful. That's divine in itself. So I encourage you to reach out to her, get the Spotify music at the email that's there. Just request that and she'll get it to you. So with that all said, everybody have a grateful day. Have a great weekend. Be safe and God bless everybody. We'll wrap it up.